So we started having like that monthly business meeting where we looked at all the bills, looked where our retirement was going, kid expenses, everything. And we stuck to a budget, and then we'd go back and look at the budget at the end of the month and see if we messed up, like where could we save the following month. And we just got into such a good routine that way. And sharing the burden, because I had taken on that burden for a long time. And his job was stressful. I didn't want him to stress out all the time about money. So that really helped us a lot. Having that conversation out loud and discussing it with our kids too. We made every single one of our kids go through a Dave Ramsey course so that they would understand what it means to save. And I would say that all three of my kids are pretty good about money, some better than others, but they have a solid understanding of what it means to save for the future and be prepared.
Every single day, the news reports about jobs that are moving offshore each year. And when we read about the facts and statistics about it, it seems like they're just sharing numbers and statistics. But the reality is, when companies move their operations offshore, there are real people in the United States that are affected. So today's guest is one of those people who lost her job when the call center that she was working in moved their operations to India. Then she'll be sharing first and foremost the impact that it had on her and her family. This is what we're talking about. Stop and pause. So today's guest is Carrie Montano. And she's a friend of my co-host, Mandy Herring. So Mandy, would you introduce Carrie to our listeners today and tell us a little bit about her?
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Her Money Story podcast. I'm so excited to have my friend Carrie Montano on today. When I first joined the podcast and I started reaching out to people to say, hey, I'm doing this amazing new thing. Would anybody be interested in joining us? Carrie was the first person. She was the first person to say, yes, I would love to. What do you need? I'm there. So I'm so excited to have Carrie on with us today. Carrie's a friend of mine I've known for many years. We go back, we both traveled in Up With People. That's how I first met her. But then we both were economics teachers. And so we have a long history together. So I'm very excited to have Carrie here to share her story. So Carrie grew up in Connecticut. She started her career in New York City, eventually moved to Tucson, Arizona. She was married. She has 3 grown children. And so, Carrie, welcome to the podcast. Oh, and currently she works at the University of Arizona. She's been working there for 8 years. So, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So, Carrie, I thought we'd start with kind of a basic background question. This is our Her Money Story podcast, and our relationship with money often starts with our family. So let's just start off with, what was it like in your family growing up, and what was the conversation around money like in your family?
I'm the oldest of 5 children, and money was tight. My mom was super frugal. So I learned that habit from her. But I mean, we didn't talk about money. I mean, I knew we didn't have a lot. With 5 kids, we had a lot of hand-me-downs and ate a lot of mac and cheese, but we just never talked about that kind of stuff. So what I know, I learned on my own.
Perfect. Great. Good. So of those things, have you carried on a lot of it, or are there some things that you've gone maybe the other direction? Growing up, sometimes it's ingrained into us or we do the exact opposite.
I think I've carried on a lot of the things that my parents taught me. So I went to a private high school. My parents made me work in the summer and contribute to my tuition. Nothing was ever free. So, my parents charged me for things that I did, and I have done the same with my kids. As soon as they learned to drive, they had to pay their own insurance, and I made them pay for part of their college and have jobs and that kind of stuff.
All right. So, thank you for sharing that, Carrie. What I'd like to have you just kind of take a few minutes and just kind of talk about, when you were working at the call center, when you found out about getting that you were going to be downsized and they were moving the operations to India. Talk about the impact that it had on your family, please.
Okay. Well, I worked at the call center from 1998 to 2005 and worked my way up into being a manager. And I was doing fairly well financially. We moved into a bigger house. I had my third child in 2001. My oldest was getting very involved in gymnastics, and, we would pay for things as we went, put it on the credit card, and I had bonuses every quarter. So I'd pay off the credit card with the bonus. And we did a lot of home improvements, and things were going along really well. But they chose to send the job to India. So I did not change my lifestyle so much. For the first, I had severance for a while. But my husband was in education, and I thought, oh, wouldn't it be great if I went and took some courses and got certified to teach? And then with the 3 little kids, it would be good for our family. But I did not really think ahead to the financial consequences that it would cause. So, first of all, the credit cards continued to be charged, and there were no quarterly bonuses to pay them off. And when I went back to school to get my teaching certification, instead of taking out a student loan, I put it on my credit card because I thought, well, at least I'll earn points. But not thinking, I'm not paying that off at the end of the quarter anymore. And I carried a balance for a long time. I always paid at least the minimum. I never had a late payment. But, I had no emergency fund for years. And during those first couple years of teaching, I was not contributing extra to my retirement other than what the state put in. So it was touch and go for a while. And my husband had some health issues. The kids were in gymnastics. I mean, there was a time we were paying over $1,000 a month in gymnastics fees. So we had a talk with my daughter, said, we can't keep this up. You're not going to get a scholarship. You're just doing it for fun. So we have to make some lifestyle changes in the family and start paying down our debt. Our church offered a Dave Ramsey course, and we took advantage of that. And I can't say I follow it 100%, but we did start paying off high interest cards and, just really keeping a budget and being very careful about how we spent. And around that time too, I had started working at the university, and my income did go up a little bit. And we got to a point where we were pretty comfortable. Like, we had paid off all of our debt. Our cars, when we bought cars, we paid cash for them. We're moving along pretty well. Kids were starting college. I had a discount for some of my kids because I work at the university, so that helped. And then COVID hit.
Mm-hmm.
But we were doing really.
I'd like to go back a little bit if we could.
Okay.
When your job got outsourced,
Mm-hmm.
can we go back a little bit and talk about how that transition, even professionally? So, we were talking about how your family finances, but something I know about you that I found interesting is that when you found out that it was being outsourced, a lot of people are like, that's it, I'm out of here, and would quit their job. But you actually stayed on and went to India. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and why did you make that decision instead of just quitting?
Well, my husband and I had talked, and by staying until the end, I got a whole bunch of extra money because people were starting to leave, and, they couldn't be successful in India unless they had the training on our end. So they first had a group come from India to Tucson and train in the center. And then I went over there for a month with some other, managers, and we trained them. And then when I got home, within the month, the job ended, the transition occurred, and we were all paid out. But I had talked to my husband and planned to go into education. So I wasn't looking for another job. I didn't want to be in a call center anymore. I figured I had saved enough. I just did not plan and understand what it would be like to make a third or even a quarter of what I had made before. And then when I got into teaching, it was right around, 2007-ish. And we didn't get a raise for 7 years. And I knew you didn't get many raises in education, but nothing. Our health insurance did go up. The kids were growing up, expenses went up, and we just didn't do a very good job of cutting back enough. And I don't know, going back, if I would have made the decision to go into education, if I knew financially what a hit it would have been. I think I had rose-colored glasses on that one.
So I heard a couple of different things. So one of the things that you talked about is when you started at the university. Is that when you were budgeting and paying off debt, or between the downsizing and starting the university, you were budgeting and paying off debt? Could you clarify that for me?
Yeah, we really started paying down our debt once I started at the university, because I didn't get a huge raise, but significant enough that we took that extra and put it towards the debt. Yeah, it wasn't, I don't think I couldn't have done it as a teacher unless I took a second job, because there just wasn't enough to go around.
So Mandy, you were going to ask a question?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to go into a little bit more about, can you tell us a little bit more about your bounce back story? So, you've mentioned you learned Dave Ramsey, and just up until we'll get to COVID here in a little bit. Can you talk a little bit more about your bounce back story?
Okay. As you start to pay off a credit card and chop it up or pay a debt, it feels really good, like it's an accomplishment. And I think I've always paid the bills in the family. And, my husband was on an allowance and he was very understanding, but we didn't necessarily sit down and talk about finances. So we started having like that monthly business meeting where we looked at all the bills, looked where our retirement was going, kids' expenses, everything. And we stuck to a budget, and then we'd go back and look at the budget at the end of the month and see if we messed up, like where could we save the following month. And we just got into such a good routine that way, and sharing the burden, because I had taken on that burden for a long time and his job was stressful. I didn't want him to stress out all the time about money. So that really helped us a lot, having that conversation out loud and discussing it with our kids too. We made every single one of our kids go through a Dave Ramsey course so that they would understand what it means to save. And I would say that all three of my kids are pretty good about money, some better than others, but they have a solid understanding of what it means to save for the future and be prepared.
So you ended up, so one of the things I heard you say is that, looking back. So one of the questions I often like to ask is, looking back, would you have made any changes? So you've kind of alluded to it. I don't know if I would have gone into education if I realized that my income was going to be cut as much as it had. But in that transition, what were really the lessons for you as you made the transition to less income? Could you share a little bit about what you learned as going, because you made the decision that you made, so there's nothing you can do about that. But I think there's oftentimes lessons in the decisions that we make when we're looking back. So share a little bit about that, would you please?
Okay, so like I said, I would not have gone into education if I knew that it was going to put us in that position. I think it set me back quite a bit, from the career that I had started. And I mean, like you said, I can't change the decision. Going into education, I met a lot of interesting people. I loved working with students. It led me to my job at the U of A. Those are all good things. But I should have, if I was budgeting at that time and really looked at what was in the future, it positively would have helped me. I just went into it blindly and just thought, oh yeah, I'm going to do this. It'll be great, and I just did not put enough time into planning other than to say, I'm changing careers. I should have looked at the money side. Every time you make a big life decision, you really should sit down and evaluate where you are and where you're going. I did not do that. So for sure, I have a daughter that's considering making a big life change in her career in the future. And I've said, please sit down and think it through. I don't think you're ready to make this jump. You need to get, your house in order before you make a big jump like that.
Great. So since you started the university, got your financial house in order, budgeting, paying off debt, let's move into other life changes that you've experienced and how has your planning and budgeting, how has that helped you in your life? So 3 years ago, your husband passed away. What was your financial situation like dealing now with that major life change compared to what you had experienced before?
One thing that I'm extremely grateful for was early planning. So when we were young, we got a life insurance policy outside of work because, a lot of times your work will provide you with a life insurance policy, but if you leave, it goes away. So we had gotten a life insurance policy, a term life, I think when our third child was born. And it was meant to cover expenses like pay off the house, get the kids through college. It was set to expire about a year ago, when the kids were gone. So we had that in place. And then I had a small policy at work. Dave had a policy at work. I had a Knights of Columbus small policy. So we had enough life insurance. Some would say, oh, you're a little overinsured. But thank goodness, because when he died, funeral expenses, holy cow, it's like throwing a wedding. It's a lot of money all at once. I moved. We were in the process of actually buying a house when he died. And so I moved. I had moving expenses. I was able to buy the house on my own income after he died. That was a big deal because I might not have been able to do that if we didn't have those policies in place and I could prove that I had income. I've been able to, carry on some of the things, help our kids out at times that we had planned to. A lot of people worried for me, like you're a single woman now and you have one income and he has a pension and then, the life insurance. So I have not worried about what's happening with me. And I've been really lucky because grieving is a very difficult time. And to have that security is huge. I know other people who didn't have it, and I just feel so bad for them. But it was decisions we made early on that saved us.
So, no, Carrie, when I heard that, it's just like decisions that you made early on. So, kind of take us back to what you were thinking about that had you get the life insurance outside of work. Is it because you had seen other people in the past who had passed away who didn't have life insurance?
Yeah. I'm a worst case scenario kind of gal.
Okay.
So I prepare for the worst. And
okay.
I don't know. I mean, maybe it was because, in those early 2000s, after our daughter was born, there was a possibility of me losing my job. We had a lot of debt and I thought, oh my gosh, if Dave dies, I'll be on the street. So, and it wasn't a lot of money. It was like, $50 a month or something because we got it when we were so young and healthy. And, lessons learned, I got all of my kids for their 21st birthday a life insurance policy because
Okay.
young and healthy. And already I have a daughter that has some health issues at 26, but she's got that policy. So at least I know she's got something. Like, you don't think about this stuff. I have a sister that was diagnosed with cancer when she was pregnant, and she had the paperwork to fill out to increase her life insurance on the table. She had to throw it away because once you're that sick, you're not getting it. So take care of business when you're young and healthy, because, you know, hey, if I paid that life insurance and I never collected, I had peace of mind knowing it was there. It wasn't a lot of money. It was going out to dinner once a month. Totally worth it. Totally worth it. And nobody likes to talk about the bad things. Like, you don't like to think about that, but it happens.
That's
an
wonderful.
important thing, and that's really what this series is all about. Nobody likes to think about being downsized. Nobody likes to think about the partner that passes away. Nobody likes to think about any of those sorts of things. And we all know, as you were just sharing, that if you've prepared, it's not such a big thing. I mean, it's going to have an impact. Losing a partner, losing a job, it's going to have an impact, but it doesn't have to be devastating because you didn't plan for it. And I think that's really the lesson that I'm hearing in what you're sharing.
Absolutely. Losing my job, it was a terrible time for me. It was really depressing. It was, your job is connected to who you are. And you have to move on and grow. You can't wallow in it and just give up. You've got to keep going. And if you're prepared, it just makes the road so much better.
I really love this. Because something I experience working with clients when we start talking about life insurance, oftentimes one of the issues that comes up, especially with women, is if I get a life insurance policy, this is admitting that I can't handle my own business, that I need to have this because I can't handle it. And so I've had this conversation several times, and working through, the idea that, no, this isn't saying that you can't. This is, you're going to have a lot to deal with anyway. And so at least having that peace of mind. So I really love that you mentioned that, because I think that this can impact a lot of people looking at that. This isn't admitting that you can't handle something. There's so much to handle, and having this one thing off your plate can really make a difference in a difficult time.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. I'm grateful we planned ahead. I have to say, when you have kids and you start a family, once you buy your first thing together, you can't think about going it alone. You have to think about having that income together to protect yourselves. And if anything happened to either person, you wouldn't want them to have to struggle, to get by. So it's kind of a gift that you give.
Love that. A gift that you give when you do the planning. Absolutely. Absolutely. Perfect. Mandy, what else would you like to ask?
Actually, I want to ask you, Carrie, is there anything, the purpose of this podcast is to share stories, and hopefully people that are going through, similar situations, or, like you were saying, prepare ahead. Is there anything we didn't ask you about that you think would be important to mention? You've worked with a lot of young people over the years too.
No, I think you guys covered everything. I just think you can't start soon enough talking about your finances. I would say, and Mandy, you might know this too, when I was teaching, I would ask kids, and they didn't have to come back to school and tell me, but to talk to their parents. And I had some nasty emails from parents saying, "How dare you ask my child to have a conversation with me about my finances? That's my business." And it's not, it's a family business, and it needs to be discussed, because like you said, your money habits start very early, and it's okay to say I made some mistakes along the way, but I recovered. We all if you can't fail, how are you going to grow? So yeah, I got myself in credit card debt. Am I proud? No, but learn from my mistake. I got over it. I made it out and I'm okay. You can too, you know.
Wonderful. Well, we have one more question for you, Felicia.
So the final question is, I always ask the question is, in this stage of your life, what is the one song that's kind of the anthem for this stage of your life? Or you can even you relate it to any of the stages that you've been in, but what's the song that's kind of the anthem for your life
Well,
right now?
the song that keeps running through my head is Somewhere Over the Rainbow.
Ooh, I like that one.
Yeah,
So
so
tell me why Somewhere Over the Rainbow.
I just because I think, you know, I'm looking ahead that there's blue skies ahead. And I feel good. I'm proud of where I am. I know my husband and I worked really hard to raise our kids. They've all turned out okay, and I'm kind of enjoying the fruits of our labor.
Well, I'm going to throw in
Thank
one more bonus question because
you.
I love to travel. And, Felicia and I talk about that. All people that love to travel, there's always a next trip. And I
Oh,
know you like to travel also. So, speaking of over the rainbow, what do you have a wish list trip, next trip?
well, I have a bunch of trips. I want to travel when I retire, but I think my next trip is going to be to Greece.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Right.
Got it. That's definitely on my bucket list, and I've got a client next week who just came back from Greece, so I'm
Oh,
going to hear all about Greece and add that to my list. My family and I are going to Europe next year for my oldest daughter is graduated from college, so the whole family is going to go over there, and I think Greece is one of the places that we're going to try and squeeze in when we're there. So. If
awesome.
you've got some places that we should check out when we're in Greece, then share that with us, and I would include that in our bucket list as we're putting together our planning.
Sounds great. I'll do that.
All right, thank you. So here's the thing. I just really wanted to summarize. There was a couple things that you said that really stood out for me. So one is if you can't fail, how can you grow? That was, I think, really key and critical for me because I think sometimes as you were stating, like when you sent those students home to talk to their parents about finances, their parents didn't want to talk about finances. And you also started with the fact that in your household, you didn't talk about finances, and you and your husband weren't talking about finances until you kind of went through these circumstances that you went in and you adopted the Dave Ramsey have a family meeting thing, and that really made a big difference for you. So I think that that's really one of the big takeaways that I got from this particular interview. Mandy, what was the one takeaway that you got from this interview and what she shared with us?
For me, the start early. Let's
Mm,
start thinking about this stuff early and planning because even though you don't want to think about, there might be things that happen later, but just starting early and planning early. You mentioned, the emergency fund and paying off debt and just starting with that mindset and getting life insurance. So all that starting early, that's great.
got it. All right, Mandy. So could you just walk us out now?
Yeah, so everybody, Carrie, thank you so much for joining us today. If you like what you've heard and you want to hear more from us, please go to hermoneystory.com. Please like, subscribe, share, leave us a review. There'll be an opportunity to leave your email and we can send you more information. So thank you so much for joining us.
All right. Thanks a lot, Carrie. We enjoyed having you on.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye bye.